Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. And welcome to today's webinar on designing high-impact workshops. We're going to give you some key insights here from RW3 CultureWizard about how we structure our workshops, how we set them up, how we create them, and the impact that they can have on your employees, on your learners within your organization. It's actually going to be a very tactical, but very, very interesting and exciting workshop that we've got for you today. Thankfully, I will not be doing most of the talking today. It will actually be my colleague who will introduce in just a moment. But my name is Jorge Vargas. I'm Chief Revenue Officer here at RW3. And I'm, what that means is that I am in charge of the sales team at RW3, but also the client service team. So many of you who are dialed into today's call are clients of RW3. I'm sure you've seen emails from me. You've probably seen me on calls before. And so to all of you, a very special welcome from me to every single one of you. And having said that, I'm going to now hand off to my colleague, my colleague, Sean Dubberke, who is our VP of Learning. And Sean, I will hand off to you, my friend.
Thank you, Jorge. Thanks for the warm welcome. Thank you to everyone for joining today. It's really exciting to have this opportunity to share with you what we do here at CultureWizard to design interactive, memorable workshops, webinars, and other facilitated learning experiences. If you don't know that we offer instructor-led training before you join this session, you're not alone. Many people know us for our digital learning on CultureWizard, but I do hope you'll leave this session knowing that we are eager to partner with you on live learning as well. We are a company of diverse individuals, as you probably know, that have come together under the mission to help our clients transform their workforce into one that is inclusive and globally minded through a blended learning methodology that compels professionals to be the best versions of themselves. We've pioneered a globally consistent, locally relevant learning solution through long-term partnerships with our clients, some of which have been with us since our establishment back in 2001. And we're proud to share that to date, over 5 million corporate employees in hundreds of countries have benefited from our learning resources. I want to point out on the middle column here, excellence, which is, I'd say, part of our culture, our client service philosophy as well. 95% of those workshop participants rate their learning experience with us as excellent, and 97% said they would recommend us to a colleague. These are stats from last year. So we don't take our role as professional educators lightly. We proudly serve a global pool of talent with the positive message of global inclusion and opportunities to grow and build skills with us. Again, my name is Sean Dubberke. I'm Vice President of Learning, and in this role, I lead our CultureWizard Live line of business. That's the brand name for our instructor-led training. I'd like to say that I grew up myself intercultural in a family of newcomers to the US from Germany and Italy and Cuba. So I always say that I grew up extremely confused, but through this role, I'm able to share how to navigate across cultures and to do so inclusively with clients. My operations team and I partner with the CultureWizard client service team in a rather seamless fashion to design and deliver learning experiences worldwide. And we also partner with a global network of really, really cool, interesting facilitators who we deploy locally for those in-person and also virtual learning experiences. Now, I'd like to just pause and ask for you all in the audience to share 1 or 2 words to describe the best workshop or professional learning experience that you've ever attended. What is the word that comes to mind for those that you would consider to be the best, the ones that you remember the best?
All right, and of course,
the chat area, I believe. Yeah, go ahead, Jorge.
Y'all know I was going to say I'll read out some of the answers, but of course, right when I was going to start doing that, a huge siren drove by my window. So sorry for that. That's why I was awkwardly delayed there. But okay, so yeah, a few people writing in saying, you know, describing some of the best workshops that they've attended, writing in words like memorable. I'm also seeing someone else who wrote in interactive, thought-provoking. Okay, a great facilitator, Yeah, so kind of a little bit of what you'd expect here coming in from some of these answers, right? People who are writing in, again, on that questions box if you can't find it in the GoToWebinar platform.
Great, great. Yeah, I mean, you know, a good workshop is one that sticks, is one that makes an impact, and that's sort of how we design our ILT solution. So thanks for sharing that. Obviously, you know, lots of words here to describe a good learning experience, but the ability to recall what you learned, I think for us is a top priority, because what we know is that people tend to forget very quickly because we become distracted or we don't have chances to apply what we've learned. So we, here at CultureWizard, well, I've been here for 16 years. Let's start there. And I have to say that one of the things that distinguishes us, just given the length of time I've been around and observed and engaged with clients on this stuff, is that what distinguishes us most is that we really go to great lengths to design ILT that works for the participants and the stakeholders. So our clients tell us that they come to us because they can trust that we'll accomplish what we say we'll accomplish, relieving them of having to reinvent the wheel on their own. So our workshops are never off the shelf. We've learned, again, through years of experience, that the success of any workshop or live learning experience really hinges upon our understanding of the needs and realities of the learners. So the ILT that we develop, again, ILT is shorthand instructor-led training, is always heavy on activities, practical exercises, social learning to get participants involved every step of the way with minimal lecture. We put participants to work, we engage them on a variety of social levels. And this is because this is how adults learn best. Of course, we have to modulate for cultural value differences in different parts of the world. So we obviously employ our own intercultural skill set to make sure that things are culturally appropriate. But we do have a real strength in developing and tailoring learning exercises that achieve the learning objectives. So many clients often create learning objectives that align the organizational culture or move the needle for the organizational culture towards alignment with their business mission. We do this with many clients. We see how learning and development are part, or learning and development opportunities like workshops are part of the larger culture change mission. So if a client wants folks to develop a more direct communication style, or they want them to be more proactive and creative in sharing their ideas, we create a role play for participants to practice voicing their creative thinking directly, succinctly, etc. If the stakeholder wants their team to more carefully manage implicit bias, we test their cognitive flexibility with a series of statements designed to trigger bias, and then we see how easily participants can sidestep the bias. Our facilitators spend most of their time facilitating, not lecturing. They use inductive reasoning to help participants find their way to the things that they need to do differently instead of spoon feeding them the answer. So more of a consultative coaching type process. But bottom line is that we need the people in our workshops to take ownership over their own growth by coming up with strategies from within through a facilitated process. And that's really important to us. And then I'll just say that our assessments on CultureWizard, our digital learning platform, are always assigned as pre-work, and we direct participants to a customized learning journey afterwards, after the workshop or the webinar. And keeping a growth mindset, continuous learning are core to our philosophy. So we find that most of our clients agree with this approach to professional development. We also do our best to tie our workshops to existing L&D or talent mechanisms within our client organization. So for example, we've often suggested adding a performance metric or discussion related to confidence working across cultures or collaborating inclusively with the manager, leveraging the individual's assessment results to drive some sort of growth and accountability. And of course, we love to integrate these real world factors. The VUCA acronym is one that we often lean on, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that is certainly part and parcel of working in a modern, if not global or international organization. So I'll just pause there and see if, Jorge, if there are any questions, and if not, then I'll invite you to opine a bit on our approach, which is coming up right here.
Yeah, no questions so far, but let's talk a little bit actually about our our approach. And thanks, Sean. So far, I think actually Sean's already done a pretty great job of explaining how what the philosophy is behind our blended learning solution and the way in which we interact. We connect the learning with the platform itself. But let's go a little bit further. Those of you who are clients of CultureWizard are probably familiar with two of our key assessments, one of which is the culture calculator and the other one of which is the global inclusion calculator. And the culture calculator is measuring each individual's cultural work style, and the global inclusion calculator is measuring each individual's capacity for inclusive behaviors, right? Now, one of the things that we can do with this information is, of course, the learner, the employee takes the assessment, they see their results, and they're provided recommendations on different things that they can do, modifications they can make, etc. What we can do, however, is we can give you as the client an overview of all of the results for your organization, right? We anonymize and we aggregate, so you wouldn't see what each individual has, but you would see the larger whole, and you'd have a good understanding of what the scores look like within your organization and how they compare to a global benchmark that we would provide for you. Based on that information. There we go. Sorry, I'm not sure. I got a pop-up telling me my audio was disconnected. But based on that, I'm back. Okay, that was really strange. I've never had that happen before. Anyway, based on that, based on the information that we gather and then we provide for your organization, we can actually start to customize workshops for you, and we can strategize with you as to what makes the most sense, right? And where you should begin, what you should be focusing on. And all of our workshops, again, have this pre-work and workshop delivery phase where we assign, jointly with you, we assign some learning resources for each individual before the session takes place. And we also work with you, we partner with you to tailor the session for your specific needs. And then, of course, once the session takes place, the platform, again, is reintegrated into the whole conversation with further learning and measurement of growth for the individual, again, along those assessments, and also with additional courses. On the next slide, though, I want to talk a little bit more about this analytics component that I was starting to speak about when my audio cut out, and I'm not sure how much you all caught of that. But I mentioned briefly, right, the two assessments that we have, the global inclusion calculator and the culture calculator. And so in a little bit more detail, right, what we now have is a dashboard where you're able to go into the platform, log in and open up this dashboard where you'll see those results in real time, right? And you'll be able to see what the scores are for your organization, what the benchmark is. You'll be able to see trends. You'll be able to see what different segments look like within your organization. So, for instance, does my senior leadership score higher on collaborative leadership than the rest of the organization does? We hope so, but is that a true statement, right? And that's something you could answer very quickly using the data we provide based on these assessments, right? And so, based on all of that, again, the idea is for it to power your learning strategy and partner with us to really achieve your goals going forward, and to measure growth within the organization, and to implement recommendations even outside of training, right? When you start to get into other things that might be focused more on different policies you might want to enact, or different initiatives that you might want to put into place within the organization, right? So it's just a little bit about global inclusion analytics. Those of you who are our clients, you're more than welcome to reach out to our client service managers, and they will give you temporary access to that dashboard following a quick call, and you can start to see some of that data for yourself. So we're happy to have those conversations. But okay, Sean, before my audio cuts out again, because now I'm a little terrified, back to you.
No, thank you, Jorge. I appreciate you jumping in to talk about that. This is one of those unique ways in which we can really uncover, using workforce analytics, where we have a chance to move the needle. And that is part of our first task, which is to listen. So we can listen via the technology that powers our analytics line of business. But in addition, we do the old-fashioned way of listening, where we listen very actively in discussing one-on-one or in groups with stakeholders what the needs are and how we can design learning to really meet the expectation or the challenge of the need. And we've been doing this for decades. So active listening, listening with cultural humility, listening with an eye towards mitigating bias as designers of learning experience is really critical. So we've developed that capacity in our organization, and it's really important that we do that we live by this notion of listening actively and making sure, verifying that we understand exactly what the challenges are of our participants and the stakeholders. And we do this with multinational, regional, local organizations. We work with all industries, and we do our best to get ourselves into the shoes of the learner so that we can create really engaging, relevant learning experiences. So workshop participants also are important for us to get to. So beyond the stakeholders, we can survey the larger group of people who are going to be in front of our facilitators to make sure that we hear from them as well. And of course, we always do what we often do, which is to have a discussion at the beginning of each workshop to actually get the participants to vocalize why they are there, why they want to learn, what their challenges are, and how we can sort of help them in the moment as well. And, we do what we say we do. We teach intercultural skills, we teach inclusion, we practice those as facilitators and as designers of learning. And we also honor that philosophy that I mentioned before, where we understand for many of our global or multinational clients that there's a need for some global consistency around the outcome or the learning objectives. But we also know that to make things work at a local level, we need to make the learning locally relevant. So we are flexible in the way that we design learning so that it can be globally consistent, locally relevant. And that is sort of the hallmark of many, many global organizations that we work with today. And it's really, really important to us as well. Now, the pre-work, as many of you probably know, those of you who are our clients, is one of two assessments. The Global Inclusion Calculator, which you see here, which is a developmental assessment that measures one's capacity for inclusion. This is also part of the aggregate report that we can create with the anonymized aggregate reporting for large groups of people, but for the individual, we have them complete this in advance of a workshop on inclusion or D&I or something related. And this is where we can then integrate the results into an activity to develop an action plan or development plan to help folks amplify those dimensions that show room for improvement. The culture calculator is the other assessment. So this one may be used for a global mindset workshop, a global leadership workshop, maybe a global team building workshop itself. And this measures one's working style as a function of your cultural value system across 8 dimensions of culture. This is not a developmental assessment, but it is a tactical assessment to show people who they are and also to show where there are gaps or similarities with other people or other national cultures. You can see that in my profile here. I'm comparing myself with China, and I can see very quickly that there are some gaps. And obviously, we work with our participants to create strategies to bridge those gaps. So I just want to highlight how we design workshop activities with a couple examples, just to give you a flavor, because we don't have so much time, but I think it's worth showing where we are peeking under the hood, as it were. If we were to look into the engine of a car, let's see what the actual mechanics of these workshops is like. And we love to create, again, those engaging activities. In this case, role play to help participants understand what it takes to enable inclusion. So we design a series of scenarios that demonstrate a lack of inclusion or some sort of exclusionary behavior. Maybe it's bias behavior or microaggression or something a little more explicit and overt. And what we do is we put people into groups and we ask them to develop a plan to change or shift gears in this scenario to introduce more inclusive tactics, to sort of arrest or interrupt the biased behavior and to become an ally or to show allyship and to enable inclusion. So we ask people to act out the skit as it's written, and then we ask them to act out the skit once more, incorporating those techniques to demonstrate a more inclusive environment. And this is a really fun, interesting, at times can be a kind of a spectacle, because people get to watch their colleagues take ownership over the situation, and people get really involved. I've seen this play out very well in a virtual environment, also in a face-to-face environment, and people often very quickly get over the notion of discomfort of, okay, I have to act a certain way, but because the skits are relevant to their workplace, people find themselves not so far from the scenario. People often report, oh yeah, I've seen this before, and now I have a safe space in which I can practice being more inclusive. So that's one example of getting people involved. Another is to use a team profile. This is a sample team profile to help teams understand how they can integrate their cultural differences, their work style differences in a productive way to create guidelines for high performance. So you can imagine a team of 20 or so people looking at their profile, understanding and seeing for the first time where their team members land across this spectrum here, which is for motivation, and then having a discussion around how we can use this information to find a middle ground, to find a compromise perhaps, or to just simply know one-to-one where this person is on the far left end, work-life balance, and then these two people here on the far right end, being more interested in status and workplace achievement, and how they can reconcile those different views of motivation. And this is really, really important to building cross-cultural, multicultural, global teams, virtual teams. Any kind of team can benefit from that kind of team building workshop that we do very often with many of our clients. We also have developed a variety of compelling video case studies and interactions that get people to, again, absorb this information in a more interactive kind of multimedia fashion. And this one is a conversation between two individuals from different parts of the world. And with the voiceover track, it sort of, again, creates a bit of a visceral feeling of, okay, yeah, this clash of cultural value differences really didn't work out. So how can we help these two individuals do better by bridging their differences? And yeah, the last one here is more of a case study. We often will create case studies to help, in this case, global virtual teams overcome their differences. And this is, again, similar to the team building approach before, but this is a fictitious team that we give people a sense of, and the complaints or grievances and quotes from each of these different locations lends itself to some discussion around, okay, well, how can we actually capitalize on the intellectual contributions of these people in different parts of the world? They're clearly sharing these challenges with us. What can we do to incorporate them, to be inclusive of them, and to create a more inclusive and collaborative environment despite the geographic distance and the cultural distance as well? So these breakout discussions tend to be really rich, and the debrief that follows is where we see a lot of the magic, where people come up with creative solutions to these challenges that are relevant to their workplace. I will just pause to ask Jorge, have there been any chats, any questions, anything that I can clarify?
There was just one question. Someone was asking about, with the workshops, is there a recommended classroom size, so to speak, for the sessions?
Yeah, well, it really depends on the goals and also the audience that you have. So, I mean, webinars for 100 people achieve a certain goal, usually around imparting knowledge. But when it comes to practicing skills, skill building workshops, we recommend groups of 20 to 25 so that we get a chance to be with, so that our facilitators, who I'm going to talk about in a moment, can actually get to as many people as possible, and also to allow for folks to interact in small groups versus larger groups, so that everyone gets a chance to actually contribute, to say something, to share a challenge, or to practice these skills that we're teaching. So 20 to 25 is the sweet spot for the skill building type workshops. But of course, we do lots of larger format webinars with hundreds of people. So it really just depends on your learning goals. Thank you for the question. So then, yeah, just a quick note, our facilitator network is well, 200 plus senior facilitators. To me, that's a pretty big number, but we have a very curated group that we've developed over the years. They're in 80 countries, and we leverage them to do in-person and virtual sessions in time zones that make sense for the participants. And our facilitators can facilitate in a variety of languages. We tend to do most of our workshops in English, but we always offer, if there's a need, to do learning in the local language, which often is preferred by the learner. Our facilitators are certified to debrief our assessments, and they carry with them lots of experience across the two key practice areas, whether it's intercultural or inclusion. And you can see a bit about two individuals, Mark, who's here where I am in Los Angeles, and Shilpa, who's in Bangalore. But yeah, we've got folks all over the place. So if you've got a question about a facilitator in a part of the world where you have a need, please feel free to reach out, and we'll share a couple of bios so you can see who we work with in that part of the world. And of course, implementation is critical. Once we've designed, delivery is the next step. So we've got to be responsive. We have to have a sense of urgency. We're really big on that, perhaps because of our homegrown New York City company culture, where time is in fact money. So we are very much known for being responsive and in constant communication with our clients. We are flexible, we're adaptable. This is critical, especially when we pilot learning for the first time and we learn lots of new things as participants react for the first time to what we've developed. So we have to incorporate that feedback and quickly adjust for success moving forward. We have a project team of one of our director of operations, me, our facilitator, and our stakeholders. So we meet regularly to make sure that learning is implemented effectively. And of course, we do lots of process improvement and monthly meetings depending on the scope of the project and how big it is. And then, of course, further learning is critical. So we always design a campaign to push people back to CultureWizard after the workshop to self-guided learning, whether it's one of our courses, our e-learning courses, or perhaps we develop a roadmap for folks to follow, which guides them in a sort of self-guided fashion through a curated series of real workplace activities and digital learning on CultureWizard. So we'll be happy to discuss these options with you. They are critical to retaining information and to really integrating what they've learned and not forgetting what they learned during these workshops. And of course, measuring success is always important. We do evaluation surveys to look at the overall experience, how the facilitator performed, and we use this information to not only debrief with our stakeholders, but also to apply changes or improvements based on patterns and trends that we see in the participant evaluations. And of course, we can also go back and measure a second time with the analytics line of business to see what change has taken place. So you can imagine with the global inclusion calculator, in the beginning, we have an aggregate report, and then after a learning initiative, we can measure again to see where there was an amplification of a dimension of inclusion or some sort of delta between the pre-measurement and the post-measurement, which is really a beautiful thing that can demonstrate return on investment. So then we are almost done. I'll just leave you with a little bit of client feedback here that you can read. And yeah, at this point, I'd like to say thank you so much for attending, and I'd love to open the floor for any questions that you might have.
Yeah, there were a couple that came in. So and it's funny because I feel like they kind of go to two different extremes, but I love it. So one person was asking, because we've talked a lot about group sessions, do we do any individual trainings, maybe for like a particular leader or something like that?
Oh yes, yeah, good point. So yeah, we do one-on-one coaching. We do one-on-one training for international assignees and their families who are relocating abroad. And the leadership coaching or the executive coaching we offer is very much designed to help folks who are entering a regional, global, or some sort of cross-cultural leadership role to help them develop skills to lead effectively across those differences that mark global leadership roles. But yeah, we do coaching on inclusive leadership. We do one-on-one coaching on really specific things that are defined by the coachee with their coach. And our coaches obviously are represented in that network of facilitators. Many of them are also executive coaches or leadership coaches or just professional coaches. So the one-on-one offering is very much part of our ILT package. So yes, please be in touch if you have any requests there.
Yeah. And the other question was if there's a capacity to train internal folks. So I think something maybe like train the trainers is what the question's asking about.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. We do train the trainer, specifically focused on things like how to administer and debrief our assessments. We've done train the trainers to teach internal facilitators, or sometimes it's even just champions or advocates for D&I, for example, to facilitate their own workshops on creating an inclusive workplace culture or developing a global mindset, so we can design these train-the-trainers based on your needs. And again, it's important that we understand who are these individuals who will be doing training. Are they actually facilitators, or are they people who are volunteering their time to support a D&I initiative, for example? And we adjust based on their level of experience doing that sort of thing, doing workshops, facilitating workshops, etc. So it is quite an important strategy for many of our clients who want to replicate this message in a sustainable way with people who are internal. So yes, we very much do that as well.
Perfect. Perfect. And I'm not seeing any other questions. The one thing I will say is we'll have, for those of you who are clients of RW3, we'll have your client service managers send over a brochure so you can see all the different options that we have and so forth. If you're interested in that, because we won't get into all that today, but you'll have the brochure and be able to use it. And yeah, of course, if you do have any other questions, there's Sean's email right there on the screen, as well as mine. Feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'd be more than happy to help you. Having said that, Sean, thank you so much for today's webinar and today's session. And thanks to all of you for attending today as well.
Thank you, Jorge. Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.